Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here today. I want to ask a very specific question, and this is about hours of service for truckers. Do you feel as though that you are endangering the lives of any American on the roadway with the hours of service waivers that are being given for truckers that are hauling something related to COVID or, Clorox or automobile parts?
Well, we think the waivers are justified, or we wouldn't enact them. I do think that over time we're going to learn from the data that come back on what effect, looking back on these years, the waivers will determine to have. But of course, if we didn't believe that they were a responsible way to strike the balance, we wouldn't pursue them.
Agreed with you, Secretary. If we didn't believe that they were responsible, they wouldn't be in place. So there are hours of service waiver for allowing truckers who carry food, fuel, products to fight COVID, livestock, car parts, a host of things on that list. And they can basically set their own flexible driving schedule that they otherwise wouldn't be allowed to, as long as they take a 10-hour break each day. So it's far more simple than what they otherwise fall under without that waiver. So I would say it in this way. I think you and I could agree that a trucker is not a safer driver because they're carrying Frosted Flakes that might be on the waiver list versus laundry detergent. That would be an agreeable statement?
I think so. Obviously, we recognize there are certain differences in cargo, but not all of those differences are the same as the ones that qualify you for the waiver. If that's
but in that example, Frosted Flakes would be waivered so that you could just have a 10-hour break. Laundry detergent wouldn't be waivered.
Okay.
So that wouldn't make a difference in the quality of the trucker or how they perform their duties or safety?
I hope not.
I would hope not as well. Likewise, we couldn't say that they would be better because they're carrying Clorox wipes versus baby clothes, right? And the list could go on and on. So the request here is, for our truckers, the administration, it's clearly determined that this kind of flexibility for truckers, it's not a major safety threat to say truckers, hey, if you're carrying COVID-related items or Clorox wipes, all you need to do is make sure that you have a 10-hour break. We don't need all of these other things that go on in that hours of service, lack of flexibility. So it's not a threat. We agree on that. We've determined it. The goods being carried don't determine the threat largely. Obviously, there can be hazardous materials, but even when we talk about hazardous materials, we could say that fuel is on that waiver list, probably one of the most hazardous materials that could potentially be involved in a collision, but that is on the waiver list. So we look at this and we say the Trump administration, they had that policy for about 9 months. The Biden administration has now had that waiver policy for about 1.5 years. So the request is, let's make it permanent and extend those protocols to truckers that are carrying anything. Right? They shouldn't have to go through the red tape of determining whether they're carrying Frosted Flakes or laundry detergent or Clorox wipes or baby clothes or whatever. If it's not a safety threat, as we've determined it's not, to give them those 10 hours, you get 10 hours of rest. It's not a safety threat. Let's let them not have to waiver this.
So I think the response to that hangs on the difference between believing something is a responsible balance and believing it has no safety impact at all. I think we're agreed that it was a responsible way to strike the balance, especially in responding to a crisis that's claimed the lives of 1 million Americans. I would want to see more data suggesting that there was no safety impact at all before I could endorse the conclusion that you're speaking to. But I do think it is reasonable to say that any time, even if it arises out of an emergency, we gather data from some kind of flexibility being introduced, we should learn from that and include that in our decision-making for the future. I just wouldn't say that we've reached the point where we think that in any way justifies releasing those safety requirements wholesale.
Yeah, and I can appreciate you wanting to look at the finer data points of this. It would be wrong for us not to do that. But again, just to close that, we can see that we are assessing there's not a big enough safety threat to get rid of it. It's gone on for 9 months under Trump and 1.5 years, plus 2 years under Biden. So it's not a big enough safety threat to not do that. we should be looking at that for everybody, given, people carry a host of different things. Just one final quick point here, and this comes from people that have to deal with the FAA badge office. I have an understanding that there are a number of very disrespectful people in the FAA badge office that people in D.C. here are not happy having to deal with in that office. If you could address that in the way that they treat people that come through that badge office, it would be greatly appreciated by some people that I know.
I'll look into that right away. Thanks for
Thank you
raising
very
that.
much. Appreciate it.